I was a self-improvement addict. And no, this is not some anti-self-improvement rant where I'm going to tell you to give up on bettering yourself. Let me be clear. I'm not against personal growth. Growth is essential. What I'm against is the toxic, obsessive pursuit of optimization that masquerades as self-improvement and actually makes people worse. I mean, I was literally addicted to the process of trying to fix myself. I'd wake up at 5 a.m. for morning routines that included meditation, journaling, cold showers, and some productivity hack I read about on a blog. I had spreadsheets tracking my habits, apps monitoring my mood, and enough self-help books to build a small fortress. And you know what? I was absolutely miserable. See, here's the thing that nobody in the $13.2 billion self-improvement industry wants to tell you. The relentless, compulsive pursuit of personal growth might actually be making you worse. Now, this isn't about abandoning growth or using this as an excuse to avoid working on genuine issues in your life. We're talking about the difference between healthy development and the kind of obsessive self-optimization that creates more problems than it solves. We're going to talk about how your innocent desire to become a better person can cross the line into something that secretly destroys your mental health. You'll understand why sometimes the best thing you can do for your personal growth is to stop trying so hard to grow. Let's start with something most people don't realize. Self-improvement can literally become an addiction. And I'm not being dramatic here. Research shows that any behavior that triggers our brain's reward system can become addictive. We're talking about the same neurological pathways involved in substance abuse. When you finish reading a self-help book or complete a 30-day challenge, your brain releases dopamine. You feel accomplished, motivated, like you're finally getting your life together. But here's where it gets problematic. Just like with any addiction, you need more and more of that stimulus to get the same high. One book becomes 10 books. A simple morning routine becomes an elaborate 2-hour ritual. A weekend seminar becomes a $5,000 life coaching program. This happens because of what psychologists call moving goalpost effect. Every time you achieve a personal growth goal, your brain doesn't celebrate. It immediately looks for the next mountain to climb. Neuroscientist Dr. Antonio Damasio's research shows that our brains are prediction machines, not happiness machines. They're designed to solve problems, not to be satisfied. This is normal brain function, not a character flaw. But when this natural tendency gets hijacked by the self-improvement industry, you end up in what I call the identity trap. When personal growth becomes your entire identity, every setback becomes a personal failure. You're not just someone who had a bad day, you're someone who's failing at being their best self. Dr. Kristin Neff's research on self-compassion shows that people who tie their self-worth entirely to improvement have lower resilience and higher rates of depression. Sometimes the endless pursuit of betterment can become its own form of suffering. But let me be clear, this doesn't mean you should stop working on legitimate issues or avoid growth altogether. The key is recognizing when improvement becomes compulsion. The second way personal growth can harm your mental health is through what psychologists call toxic positivity. Now, toxic positivity isn't just being optimistic. Optimism is generally healthy. It's the relentless pressure to maintain a positive mindset even when your life is genuinely difficult, and the belief that negative emotions are somehow wrong or should be avoided at all costs. Research published in multiple psychology journals shows that suppressing negative emotions actually makes them stronger. When you try to positive think your way out of legitimate grief, anger, or sadness, you're not healing. You're creating psychological stress that can lead to anxiety, depression, and physical health problems. But here's what really concerns me about toxic positivity. It makes people feel guilty for having normal human emotions, and it creates what researchers call the paradox of control. The more you try to control your internal state through external practices alone, the more out of control you feel. This is backed by acceptance and commitment therapy research, which shows that attempts to rigidly control thoughts and feelings often intensify them. Think about it. You lose your job, and instead of allowing yourself to feel scared or disappointed, you immediately start posting on LinkedIn about how this is an opportunity for growth. Your relationship ends, and instead of grieving, you jump into self-help mode, talking about lessons learned and becoming the best version of yourself. This isn't healing. This is emotional bypassing, and it's becoming epidemic in our culture. Dr. Susan David, a psychologist at Harvard Medical School, calls this false positivity, and her research shows it actually correlates with lower psychological well-being. People who acknowledge and process their negative emotions, who let themselves feel the full spectrum of human experience, are more resilient and happier in the long run. Now, I want to be very clear here. I'm not saying you should wallow in negative emotions or use this as permission to be emotionally dysregulated. There's a huge difference between acknowledging difficult emotions and letting them control your life. The goal is emotional awareness and appropriate processing, not emotional chaos. As the Apostle Paul wrote, "In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you're still angry." Even biblical wisdom recognizes that negative emotions are natural. The key is how we handle them, not whether we feel them. Now, let's talk about one of the biggest challenges: the direct pursuit of happiness itself. There's this concept in psychology called the hedonic treadmill, and it explains why chasing happiness can be counterproductive. The hedonic treadmill theory, developed by psychologists Philip Brickman and Donald Campbell, shows that humans have a baseline level of happiness that they return to regardless of positive or negative events. You get that promotion, buy that car, lose that weight. You experience a temporary spike in happiness, but then you adapt and return to your baseline. Here's some fascinating research. Dr. Sonia Lubomirsky's studies at UC Riverside demonstrate that about 50% of our happiness is determined by genetics, 10% by circumstances, and only 40% by intentional activities. Understanding this isn't discouraging, it's liberating. It means you're not responsible for controlling every aspect of your emotional state. But here's the counterintuitive part. The more you actively pursue happiness as a goal, the more elusive it becomes. When we constantly chase the next level of personal development without appreciating current progress, we're essentially running faster on this treadmill without getting anywhere. This isn't just philosophical theory. Researchers at UC Berkeley found that people who value happiness more than others actually report lower levels of well-being. Why? Because the act of constantly monitoring your happiness makes you hyper-aware of when you're not happy, which paradoxically makes you less happy. And personal development culture has turned this into an industry. We've created an entire ecosystem around the idea that if you just find the right technique, the right mindset, the right morning routine, you'll achieve some permanent state of happiness and fulfillment. But that's not how human psychology works. Happiness isn't a destination you arrive at. It's often a byproduct of living according to your values and accepting life's inevitable ups and downs. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychologist, wrote in Man's Search for Meaning, "Happiness cannot be pursued, it must ensue." He understood that happiness comes as a result of meaningful engagement with life, not from chasing happiness itself. Here's the harsh truth of the day that might sting a little. If you're constantly working on yourself, you might be avoiding actually living your life. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but think about it. When you're always in self-improvement mode, you're essentially saying that your current self isn't good enough to deserve happiness, love, or success. You're perpetually living in the future, waiting for the day when you finally arrived at the perfect version of yourself. If you're constantly trying to fix yourself, what message are you sending to your subconscious? That you're fundamentally broken, that your value depends on continuous improvement, that who you are right now isn't enough. But here's the thing, that day never comes, because there's always another level, another goal, another area to optimize. Meanwhile, life is happening right now. Relationships are forming, opportunities are presenting themselves, moments of genuine joy are available to you, but you're too busy tracking your habits and analyzing your thoughts to notice. This doesn't mean you should stop all self-reflection or improvement efforts. It means finding balance between growth and acceptance, between becoming and being. The final way personal growth can harm your mental health is through what I call the comparison trap, combined with destructive perfectionism. Social media has turned personal development into performance art. People aren't just working on themselves anymore, they're curating their self-improvement journey for public consumption. You scroll through Instagram and see someone's perfect morning routine, their meditation space, their workout videos, their gratitude journaling. And suddenly, your own efforts feel inadequate. This creates what researchers call compare and despair syndrome. Leon Festinger's social comparison theory explains why this is so psychologically damaging. When we constantly compare our behind-the-scenes reality with other people's highlight reels, we experience chronic feelings of inadequacy and self-doubt. Dr. Rachel Callejero's research found that people who engage in frequent social comparison around self-improvement goals show decreased life satisfaction, regardless of their actual progress. But it gets worse when you add perfectionism to the mix. Dr. Brené Brown's research on shame and vulnerability shows that perfectionism isn't about high standards, it's about trying to earn approval and acceptance. When personal growth becomes perfectionist, it shifts from healthy striving to shame-based improvement. A meta-analysis of 284 studies involving over 57,000 participants found that perfectionism is strongly correlated with depression, anxiety, and eating disorders. This doesn't mean we should abandon standards. It means we need to approach improvement with self-compassion rather than self-criticism. The psychologist William James observed over a century ago, "The art of being wise is knowing what to overlook." In our age of constant comparison and perfectionism, this wisdom is more relevant than ever. So what's the alternative? How do we grow without destroying ourselves in the process? First, we need to understand the difference between authentic growth and performative improvement. Authentic growth happens when you're addressing real problems in your life because you want to reduce genuine suffering, yours and others. It's motivated by actual need, not by the idea that you should be constantly optimizing yourself. Performative improvement is when you're doing things because you think that's what people who have their lives together do. It's motivated by external validation and the fear that you're not enough as you are. Here's how to tell the difference. Ask yourself, would I still do this if nobody knew about it and there was no way to track or measure it? If the answer is no, you're probably in performative mode. So here are 5 practical things you can do to escape the toxic side of self-improvement. Number 1. Practice radical acceptance. This doesn't mean giving up on growth or settling for dysfunction. It means accepting yourself as you are right now, with all your flaws and limitations, while still being open to healthy change. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught, "Some things are within our power, while others are not." Start each day by acknowledging that you're already complete as a human being. You might choose to grow, but you don't need to grow to be worthy of love, happiness, or success. Number 2. Embrace good enough. Dr. Barry Schwartz's research on maximizers versus satisficers shows that people who seek good enough solutions are consistently happier than those who seek absolute perfection. This doesn't mean lowering your standards, it means recognizing when something is genuinely sufficient and appreciating it. Look, I want to be absolutely clear. I'm not saying personal development is evil or that you should never try to improve yourself. Growth is a natural and important part of being human. But real growth happens when you're not obsessively trying to grow. It happens when you're living your life, facing challenges, making mistakes, and learning from them organically. Remember the principle of seasons. Ecclesiastes tells us, "To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under heaven." Some seasons are for growth, some for rest, some for maintenance. Forcing constant growth is like trying to make a plant bloom year-round. It's unnatural and ultimately destructive. Aristotle had this concept called eudaimonia, often translated as happiness, but it's more like flourishing or living well. And he argued that eudaimonia isn't something you pursue directly, it's the natural result of living virtuously and engaging meaningfully with the world. The same is true for personal growth. The more directly and compulsively you chase it, the more it can elude you. But when you focus on living according to your values, contributing to something larger than yourself, and accepting both the light and dark parts of human experience, growth happens naturally. So maybe the most radical thing you can do for your personal development is to relax a little about developing yourself. Maybe it's time to start living instead of constantly preparing to live. Because as the ancient wisdom reminds us, there is a time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted. Sometimes growth comes from planting new seeds. Sometimes it comes from accepting what has already grown. Here's the point of everything we just covered. Personal growth becomes destructive when it shifts from authentic need to compulsive optimization. When you're constantly chasing the next level of yourself, you're missing the life that's happening right now. Stop treating yourself like a project that needs fixing. You're not broken. You don't need constant improvement to be worthy of happiness, love, or success. Instead of asking, how can I optimize myself today? Start asking, how can I live authentically today? Instead of chasing happiness, focus on meaningful engagement with your values and relationships. The goal isn't to become the perfect version of yourself. The goal is to accept the version of yourself that already exists while remaining open to natural, organic growth. Growth happens when you stop forcing it. Happiness emerges when you stop chasing it. Peace comes when you stop trying so hard to find it.